we can also use exception handling when we are processing text files. So for instance, when you try to open a text file and the file name that you input does not exist, then you can use exception handling to gracefully handle that exception. So let's see an example. So let's say I want to write a function that reads data from a text file. So I'm going to say read lines, and this is going to take a file name and is going to maybe return something. Okay, I'm going to like see what we are going to return here. So to open a text file, there are two things that we need to do. First is we need to open it, and then we make sure we also close it. And then whatever we want to do, we do it between those two. So I'm going to call my file object input file equal to open. I'm going to use the file name that is passed to this function, and I'm going to open that file to read from. All right, and then before I forget, I'm going to close that file object. Oh gosh, close, and here we go. So I opened it and I closed it, and whatever I want to do, I do it between these two lines. So let's say in this example, I want to count the number of lines I have in that text file. I can create a variable called count, which is like a bucket that starts from 0, and then I create a loop, like a for loop, and I say, for instance, variable line in input file, and then just count plus equal 1. All right, so for each line, I'm going to add 1 to my variable count, and then let's say at the end I'm returning that count number. Okay, so very simple thing. I'm opening a text file, I'm counting the number of lines I have inside that text file, and at the end I'm closing it and I'm returning the count number, which is simply the number of lines I have inside that text file. So now I'm going to call this function. I'm going to say read lines. I'm going to pass data.txt to it. Okay, so I'm passing a file name to my function. The file name is going to replace this thing. So you're opening that text file and you're simply counting the number of lines in it, and then so on, so good. All right, so if I run it, everything is going to be fine, and I can go ahead and say print this, which is the number of lines that is returned by that function. Okay, so now if I run it, I should get 4, I think, because in data.txt I have 4 lines. All right, now let's say I put something, a text file, like a file name that does not exist. So let's say I go with garbage.txt. Okay, so this file does not exist in the folder in which I have this code, so I should get an error message. So here you go, file not found error, which is input output error. It says not no such a file or directory. You couldn't find that file name. Basically, there wasn't any text file with that name in that folder. So in cases like that, we can try the try except block. Make sure we end the program gracefully rather than showing an error message. So I'm going to put the part that I'm not too sure about inside a try block. Okay, so I'm saying try opening this file. If everything is fine, just continue on, and you just keep going, counting the number of lines and then closing it at the end. If something goes wrong though, I want you to jump into the except section, and I want you to print file name doesn't exist. Alright, so this time if the file name does not exist, instead of seeing a red message, you are going to see like a blue message, which is like more rewarding. Okay, something went, okay, count, I didn't, okay, I need to specify count outside because I'm returning count, and if it doesn't exist, then I'm going to get a different error. So here we go. So file name doesn't exist. And talking about this error, when count was inside try, uh, the error happened in the first line. So I never got to the point that I initialize count. And then at the end I was trying to return count, but this name, this variable name didn't exist. So that was different type of error that was getting. So now let's say I want to change this program in a way that I do not pass any variable name to it. So it doesn't take any parameter. Let's say you are getting that parameter from user, okay? So you are getting file name from your user. So input and enter file name, and then you're using that file name to open something, count a number of lines, and then so on and so forth, okay? So if I run it, that should work fine, except it will ask for the file name, and here you go. But one thing that I want to change about it now is I want to create a loop here, because if I garbage.txt, if I put something that is a file name that doesn't exist, it's going to terminate my program. Let's say I do not want to terminate the program. I want it to keep going until a correct file name is entered. So for that, I can put the whole block, the whole try and except inside a loop, right? So let's say I'm creating a while loop, and it must be a while loop because we don't know how many times user is going to make a mistake. So I'm going to copy everything, tap them so they are all part of my while loop except the return. All right, we should be completely done without while loop before returning anything. So here I'm going to say, as long as it is not valid, just keep going. And I'm going to set my valid to false. So it starts with this value false. So that means not false becomes true, you go in. If everything goes fine with this, you're going to change your valid to true. All right, and that is an indication of when to stop. So if you do not, if anything, any error comes up in any of these lines, the valid is not going to be changed to true. Then you keep going until the file name is correct, and you can open that file, count all number of lines, and then close the file, and then you're going to terminate this while loop. So let's try it. So here I'm going to put garbage.txt is going to ask for another file name. Let's say this time I put data and I forgot to put .txt. Again, it asks me for another input. This time I put the correct one. So data.txt, it terminates the program and it gives me the correct outcome, which is a number of lines in that text file. Okay, so practice working with try and except whenever you think that you might get an error message. If you're working with input, if you're looking for a specific input type, you can always use try and except to make sure you are getting whatever you're looking for. Another great application for try and except is when we are dealing with text file, when you're reading from a text file. Sometimes if the text file does not exist, if that file doesn't exist in the folder that you are looking for, you're going to get an error message. So those cases you can simply put them inside try and except to make sure if an exception is raised, you're handling it. And if you take a look at lab 16, if you're curious how I'm dealing with the different error handling, I'm putting everything inside try and except. So whenever I'm calling a function, I'm using the try and except to make sure that all the correct stuff are passed to what I'm looking for. So here are the name of the test functions, and I'm going through each of those test functions inside try part. And if if the function does not exist, you're going to see this error message. So something is wrong with the function name. So whenever possible, try to use try and except to practice and get used to it. They are very, very helpful.